Over the past year, there's been many a development within the Bigfoot community, within the Bigfoot discussion, and it has created quite a chaotic environment. And it's something that most channels here on this platform don't like to talk about. But tonight, we're going to throw the gloves off and we're going to tackle this straight and head on. My name's Jaster. I'm the founder of the Southeast Bigfoot Research Organization, and coming along with me tonight is a member of the Bigfoot community that has been there, done that, and has seen the progression of this community over decades. So tonight we're going to go ahead and get into the Capturing Bigfoot movie and what that means for the rest of us. Alright, sir, go ahead and introduce yourself, what you do for the Bigfoot community and, all that kind of stuff.
Thanks, Jaster. My name's Jacob, and I've been in the community for about 3 years on Reddit, kind of just a lurker. But over time, I could see that there was, a lot of Sasquatch topics that, aspects of Sasquatch that you just couldn't really talk about openly. So I actually decided last year to make my own Sasquatch community, little subreddit,
Which is really cool.
Thank you for saying so. It's called Paranormal Sasquatch, paranormal_Sasquatch, and it's been a fun little community, slow growing, but such is the nature of the stuff we talk about. It's just not for everybody, but you can get on there and tell your story and just have a good time telling it, with absolute truth. And you don't have to worry about anybody coming down and saying it didn't happen.
Exactly.
And why you're delusional. See, we just wanted to move away from that because it really wasn't helping. So, but before that, I was a lifelong Bigfooter guy in the Pacific Northwest growing up. It's just everywhere. You can't really get away from it. So I was always immersed in it. And several years back, I decided to, after a pretty bad relationship, I decided to start hiking. So I found myself in one of the squatchiest places in Oregon. It was featured on Finding Bigfoot, I think 3 times. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Jaster, but...
Where was it exactly?
Malala.
Oh,
Malala
wow.
area. Yeah, you've definitely heard about the Malala, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty popular in the Bigfoot community. So I decided to go right there and start hiking on a trail that I enjoyed. First one I ever went to, actually, and I had a good feeling about it. And long story short, I became an experiencer on that trail.
Which is something kind of poignant to what we're going to be discussing later tonight. It's like you essentially decided to yourself, I'm going to go out there and try and find one. And you went out there and saw one your first time, trying to go out there and see one.
Let me correct you real quick. I did not see one. I heard one.
And that's close enough for a lot of people.
Yes. I don't want to claim that all of my senses have been, activated in the experience, but I definitely have heard, smelled, the works.
So whenever we're talking about what we're going to talk about tonight, I think it's really important for us to kind of set the tone and set the scene for why the Capturing Bigfoot phenomenon really made the waves that it did. Okay? So correct me if I'm wrong, add stuff when you need to here. So from what my general reading of the last 5 years in Bigfoot was that we were generally on an uphill tick when it comes to believability within modern society. It got up to the point where almost a quarter of Americans at least felt like Bigfoot was a possibility, and it became a little bit more than just a bunch of reality TV shows that you'd find after 9 o'clock at night. So that's what made everything just hit so differently for me. Personally, like right before all this happened, maybe 3 or 4 months beforehand, me and the other founder of Sebro actually went to the Stanton, Kentucky Bigfoot Expo, and we actually got to talk with uh, Dr. Jeff Meldrum, with Cliff Barackman, with the guys from KBRO, the Kentucky Bigfoot Research Organization. And we had a lot of great conversations. We heard a lot of great lectures about the subject, right? And then,
Mm.
not but 2 months later, Dr. Jeff Meldrum passes away. Which that was really kind of somber moment for us, because it's like, oh my goodness, man, like we might have actually went to one of the last big talks on the subject the man ever did, maybe the last one. Now, what really kind of got us about the whole situation is that this all happened, and then it felt like while the community was kind of reeling from the loss, that's when South by Southwest happened, and that's when the Capturing Bigfoot movie actually got revealed to the public, which kind of took a down moment for the Bigfoot community and just turned it into that scene from JoJo's, where they're all just curb stomping the dude on the side of the road.
Oh yeah.
So I can understand why people have a really bad emotional response to the Capturing Bigfoot narrative, okay? Especially for a lot of people who are emotionally invested in the topic. Now, what do you think about that? Like, what did you see from your side of the fence?
Well, I also want to say, I was heartbroken to learn that Dr. Jeff Meldrum's passing, and felt terrible for his family. Um, he was a great, great man who I had the pleasure of, observing at some conferences up in northern Washington State about 10 years ago. I saw him, and he was, of course, talking about footprints. And it was never a topic that really held my attention, but I knew that I was in the presence of one of the greats. So I, sat there and listened up anyway. And towards the end of his life, though, it did seem like he was connecting to a lot of expanded areas of the community more, And I know the guy who does Cabin in the Woods, got to have an interview with him right before his passing. And yes, capturing Bigfoot did come up in conversation. It's a production that has caused a level of division that I don't believe the Sasquatch community really needed. It almost felt divisive in its timing to me. And the fact that we still have so many questions about it, even now, what is the holdup? What is the crisis? I am skeptical, admittedly skeptical, that it has any real merit of discrediting who it is aimed at discrediting. I don't know. I feel that there are special interests involved, players involved, not to get into conspiracyville, but, it just smells wrong to me. Everything about it, to be honest.
Now,
Yeah.
I do think it's kind of important to point out here is that the claim that they're trying to smack down is probably, in the entire world of Bigfoot, the most scrutinized piece of evidence in the entire catalog. It's been scrutinized by film analysts, by photography experts, by primate locomotion experts, and ecologists, all of that. And the amount of people that are willing to put their reputation on the line for the validity of this film really makes it stand out against other pieces of Bigfoot evidence. And I think that for that very reason, it's the biggest white whale for people to try to hunt and try and debunk. Because one thing about being on the internet and understanding the society of the internet is that there are quite a few people out there that, for better or for worse, some people find joy in going fishing. Some people find joy in video games. Some people find the joy in walking up to somebody and telling them Santa's not real.
Things involving happiness, unity, and kindness. Stink Meaner got no pleasure seeing sunsets and trees, dolphins or rainbows.
Man, this some old bullshit.
Essentially. Right?
Yeah.
Like, it might not be the best comparison, but like that kind of behavior is something that is out there. And we've seen it here on the show quite a bit. The Capturing Bigfoot saga has been one of the most viewed things on this channel. And the amount of comments that is on that thing is just absolutely out the wazoo. And it became a hotbed battleground between Bigfoot believers and Bigfoot skeptics. And one of the things that really just kind of made its way across the internet is just the general community doing what the internet does, And like you said, it wasn't something that I don't think the Bigfoot community needed. They were already reeling from an emotional loss of one of the best scientific minds in the subject. And I kind of agree with you, where I feel like the timing on that was so convenient. It was within a week that the dude passed away that this happened. Within 7 days, give or take, before or after, right? And it's hard to not look at that and see the ability for the emotions of the Bigfoot community to drive that news narrative farther and farther and farther, right? It was more like, to me personally, that the people behind the Bigfoot documentary saw that he passed away and was like, let's get this news out of here right away. Because that's what's going to drive clicks. That's what's going to drive views. And that's what's going to get people to want to view it. Or get them mad enough to comment on it to drive it to somebody who might want to view it. That's where it felt probably the most disingenuous to me, was that when you take that line of thought, which I could be wrong on that, but it really feels like when you go through the known information we have on Capturing Bigfoot, right? What Bill Munns has said after his non-disclosure agreement passed, and what people have said that have went to South by Southwest, is that it's an emotionally driven narrative. And that really makes sense to me, because how did they open up this gate? How did they open up this fight? With driving a stake in one of the most emotional moments in the community. Which, anytime you're looking at debunking something that has been scientifically looked at for 60 years, you have to do more than just emotional damage.
Emotional damage. You want some therapy?
And that's where, whenever I was looking into it, because one of the things about the show that most people probably don't know is that before we founded Cbro, we actually did 4 years of doing news for video games. So understanding media, how these people frame things, and how the flow of information works when it comes to generating raves for new pieces of media, and how that can affect the entire release of a piece or a film or a video game or whatever, okay? Mm-hmm. And a lot of it started to smell fishy to me because of a lot of the extrapolated extra circumstances surrounding it, okay? Mm-hmm. The Flex debut date was weird, okay? Like, who got that wrong? Somebody got that wrong, because it's obviously not out, right? However,
right.
It also coincided to be, or it also turned out to be around the same week that Bill Munn's NDA expired. So that makes me wonder, did something fall through? because obviously something was lined up to go on there, because the NDA was set to expire around the same time the Flex premiere came out, right? That's indicative of something. Not to mention, whenever the NDA did expire, Bill Munns went nuts. Like, he went out there ahead of the curve and just laid his entire thesis out. Straight for everybody to hear. Now, that's whenever things started really blowing up, you know, because at that point now we've got both sides of the street yelling at each other. But the thing that I don't think people understand is that the aftermath of this entire situation really started to affect the Bigfoot community in ways that I don't think you understand well enough until you start to try to be either a research organization or just somebody trying to get the news out there to people. Because that the community started to behave really changed, and really, it's really interesting to me, at least personally. But let's go ahead and give it back over to you, because I know you got some stuff to say on this kind of thing.
Yes, absolutely, I do. It was all so sensational. I actually watched an interview of the producer and director of capturing Bigfoot, sorry. And right away, the way they kind of wanted to sensationalize everything about the production, and I don't have any great examples of what I mean by that, but they really wanted to discredit Bob Gimlin for not making an appearance on the program, or agreeing that it was fake or something like that. And I automatically, and they kept coming back to that. So my red flags were kind of going up on that. But the timing, like you said, right after the passing of Jeff Meldrum, for pity's sake, just give us time. But it was almost like you caught the Bigfoot community with their pants down, and now's your time to capitalize on it. You know, that's kind of how it felt, because we were in mourning as a you know, as a whole. We just lost a legendary figure, and you want to use that time. You know, they wanted to use that time to make money, which, like you said, with Bill Munn's NDA running out, where is it? It just doesn't make sense. It was like it was there to stir up emotions, and it did. And it was very incredibly divisive, and then it was just gone. It was, in my opinion, full of hot air from the start. It was just a hollow campaign, a hollow threat, to say, you know, almost, you've lost your one most credible, respected scientific figure. Now let's, you know, really tear into Sasquatch and just prove that, or get the notion trending that it is no longer, you know, cool to believe. It's no longer okay to believe. It's scientifically foolish to believe and to pursue this. It seemed like it was more than just a cash grab, but a genuine attempt, for I don't know entirely what reason, to, you know, cause a massive shift in belief about Sasquatch.
Well, and what kind of gets me is that, yeah, for people that are on the outside looking in, I guess that looks really bad. But for people who are really a part of the community, it's not like Jeff Meldrum was the only scientist on deck. He's not even close. You know? Like, right. People don't understand. Like, it's like they forget that Cliff Barackman's a biologist. You know?
I know.
That's crazy to me. It's just the fact that I guess he's not as commanding a presence or something. I don't understand. He's a very easygoing guy. That might be a part of it. He might not have that somber delivery that really kind of throws it across there. I don't know. But there are still so many big heavyweight hitters in this game, but it's like people only really looked at Dr. Jeff Meldrum, at least from the outside looking in. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that his primate locomotion research and the career that he had based that whole thing around really backed up the legitimacy of Bigfoot footprints, which is a big step into making sure the species is legitimized in some way. Because, I mean, we've talked about it a bit before, but like, it really seems like the standards for getting scientists out in the field to look into something regarding Bigfoot is so different than people's trying to find a new species of big cat. Or if they had, say for instance, let's throw this in here, let's run with that. So let's say in Indiana, where there's no really confirmed species of big cat, suddenly you started getting big cat prints everywhere. You started getting audio vocalizations of big cats everywhere. You started seeing livestock going missing. You would have the DNR out there looking for a cat. What makes Bigfoot so different? That's a constant thought in the back of my head. Because it's not like we don't have footprints. It's not like we don't have audio. But when it comes down to scientists that are willing to take this subject seriously, we're not out of people by any means. It's just that we're at this place now where the scientific community behind Bigfoot has kind of gotten knocked off its kilter. And that's something where I think we can go ahead and get into next, because the way that the Bigfoot community has kind of repaired itself, or at least kept itself together after all of these events, is really kind of the thing we really want to discuss here. Because it really feels like everybody's went underground, or they've coalesced into more personality-based communities, or with certain content creators or certain research organizations, and they've went completely radio silent everywhere else. Or they're not really willing to get up on and go to bat against skeptics on the big stage. Which, to be fair, if you're emotionally recovering from the loss of one of the bigger members of the community, you probably don't want to get out there and start boxing with the first troll across the street. Now, I think that gives some of the current bigger names in Bigfoot that have kind of came out after all of these events the opportunity to take the narrative and go where they want with it, okay? Which isn't necessarily in the realm of scientific advancement of the subject. It's like the bigger Bigfoot creators have kind of decided to go more along the lines of the supernatural with it instead of doubling down on the science, which is rough, okay? Because in my opinion, if we're going to get this subject moving in any direction forward, we have to keep the scientific ball rolling. We got to keep adding pebbles to the proverbial bucket, you know? And if we don't, then what's the other side doing? They're going to keep stacking things against us, and all we have are stories that we can't substantiate. Because this is my thought, okay? When it comes to supernatural Bigfoot occurrences, we at Sebro, we believe that things happen that people can't explain, okay? We don't take somebody's account and just throw it out the window because it has something we don't understand. I spent 3 hours one day talking to this woman in Chattanooga, Tennessee about Bigfoot activity, and then she's showing me videos of lights and orbs in the sky, okay? And I can't explain that, but that's the closest thing I've seen to a connection. But how do you package that for the scientific community to see? You know, the case needs to be built on a scientific basis first in order to build that bridge for us to get more funding, for us to get more people out there, to get more believers out there looking. Because if you got more drag nets in the water, you're going to catch more fish. Now, that's when we can start having more of a conversation about the paranormal side of it, I think, at least out in the open. Because once people start to understand that this phenomenon isn't so crazy, then they're a little more open-minded to some of the things that people say happen to them. Because right now we're still kind of in this point where we're still convincing people that there's a 10-foot tall monkey in the woods. You know, and that sounds crazy to some people. Others, it makes sense. You know? So, I think, personally, that's why we never slowed down at Sebro after the passing of Jeff Meldrum, after capturing Bigfoot, is because we've always believed that the way forward for Bigfoot is to continue to build the scientific profile. That way, one day, no matter who authored it, somebody from the scientific community is going to be able to look at that and say, hey, maybe there is something going on. Because a lot of yesteryear's civilian scientists that ended up making big discoveries ended up becoming founders of their own fields of science, you know, or at least became reputable within the scientific community in some way. If you're right, you're right. It doesn't matter if you have a degree or not. Now, the hard part with that is that whenever you start looking into the kind of things that people are reporting now and the kind of technology that people have to hoax things, things start getting muddier and muddier and muddier the farther we go in. And in order to make sure that what we're packaging up is true scientific information, that's becoming harder and harder every day. But that doesn't mean that you need to stop. That doesn't mean that you need to just give up. That just means you need to double down. The reason why we're having these issues, you know, is because we all want to have an argument as to why this thing is real. But whenever you're talking to somebody on the street about it and they're like, oh, that's goofy, you have a whole lot of things to say, but you don't have 3 hours to say it all. We need to be able to package this whole conversation up into something much more deliverable and something that has a lot more backing behind it rather than just trust me, bro, or I listen to a lot of reports. That doesn't mean you're not right. That just means we got to do better about documenting this stuff, about analyzing the patterns, and about getting that into a package that people can understand. That doesn't mean that we discount the supernatural side of it, but we can't explain that, and we can't explain the existence of it right now. So let's try to focus on the simpler thing. You see what I mean?
Yes. And if I may, I fully respect what you are saying about packaging it in a way that's digestible for the scientific community at large, the mainstream, and those, you know, who don't know a lot, you know, about Sasquatch and what's really going on. However, I mean, you know the community I'm a part of.
Right.
And it kind of got to where I got to where I am, my beliefs more based off of the Native American, oral traditions, stories of Sasquatch, more as a people. So, see, this is where you and I are on two opposite positions here, because I started more believing in Sasquatch as a people, and not undiscovered ape and stuff like that. So,
I wouldn't be so sure, man. Like, if you want me to be honest, like, I'm more on the hominid camp in all total honesty. I am, because there's, after a point, when you're starting to understand the profile and the behavior in all of the reports and all of the legends, it starts to paint a more sophisticated picture. However, what seems like a more packageable thing to talk to with the random person that might be pliant to the idea of Bigfoot existing, but not fully. Bigfoot being a primate or Bigfoot being a hominid? Primate's the answer, in my opinion. It's easier for me to convince a random dude that Bigfoot's a monkey, and then as he gets into it, they kind of get to see more and more and more, and then their mind opens up to more and more and more possibilities. But you got to get them through the door. That's kind
Absolutely. Yes, if I may interject, no, I am sorry that I accuse you of believing in Sasquatch in a certain kind of a way.
No, you're good.
I didn't mean to come off that way. I just more meant like the community at large. Maybe not you, but I would say the people you say that we want to deliver the existence of Sasquatch to, the way to sell it, to market it, is to say that it is an ape, so that they might have a way to get into it and conceive of it and rationalize it, and it's a little bit more grounded in what they may be comfortable with. But where I have a problem with that is that it takes away the honesty. It's too much, at risk of sounding brutal, I will. It's too much hand holding.
I can understand that.
It's too hand holdy. It just rip off the bandage and tell people what's going on. It's amazing the conversations I've had with people in the Pacific Northwest about Sasquatch, and I say, hey, what do you think's really going on? Why haven't we found a body yet? And they'll say, hey, and they'll look around to make sure no one's watching, and then they'll tell me it's because it's interdimensional. That's what I think. It's the only thing that makes sense. Why do you have two footprints and then it's gone? Some places in deep snow, and then they'll talk about that, but then they'll look around. They don't want anyone to know. I tell you, I've probably come across this upwards of 20 times in the past several months. I've talked to people, in different cities in Oregon. I do a fair bit of traveling, and it's amazing how many will believe in something more woo or outlandish, and they'll readily admit it. But it's the culture that says it's silly. So if it seems like maybe I'm attacking the culture, well, I think that is the crux of the issue and the divisiveness. It's the culture of that goes against the mainstream science, which is law. Basically, it cannot be contested. But hold on now. There's a lot of fringe science going on adjacent to what's already been established that's pushing the boundaries and blowing the quantum world wide open. We're starting to know that reality is getting a lot more weird and strange. But there's also it's the stranger it gets, to not put too fine a point on it, the more threatening it becomes to certain institutions, because it's all about money in the end. And the truth of anything as profound as Sasquatch is threatening. And if there is something paranormal going on with them, that's threatening. That's threatening to the big, the corporations, the lumber industry. It's threatening to everything, really, that is in a corporate-ran society,
and
more or less.
Say hypothetically, too, like, we've got infrasound technology that we know we have access to, that we've used in the field, then what it does to people. And a lot of the things that people report whenever they have a Bigfoot encounter starts to sound a lot like infrasound poisoning or other things. It's like, I think that kind of feeds into the overall point here, is that it might not be as paranormal as you think. Like, we're labeling it paranormal, right? We talk about it in that scope and in those conversations, but some of these things aren't as paranormal anymore as you would think, especially compared to 30 years ago. And so, what really hurts this whole thing, in my opinion, is that whenever you're dealing with a community that isn't 100% together on what it believes the subject matter really is, you have the different camps. And then you have people trying to convince other people, and then strangers coming into the community, that their camp is right, right? And then by the time that you get done with it, instead of having a community that's more united and willing to work together to get information out to the public, you essentially have what we like to call Bigfoot churches all across and down the road.
Yeah.
You know, where you got to go to your specific one because that guy's telling the truth, you know?
Yeah.
And like, God, I hate to hear that all the time. Like, we just try to present what we find to y'all for you to make your own decisions on. Now, sometimes we do take a little bit more of a direct approach to our persuasion, but we're never going to sit here and be like, the guy down the street don't know what he's talking about, unless we have evidence that he's actively faking stuff. Now, there's some people we do have evidence on, but we've got to make sure that we've got our ducks in a row first, you know? But we have made those videos where we've seen someone garner millions of views, get on the History Channel, all that other kind of stuff. Turned out he faked the whole thing. That guy damages the whole situation too. Just as much as us not being together on getting people convinced can be. And it's like we're fighting on both sides, where the people that really believe and want to get the subject moving forward have to deal with people on the outside convincing people at the door that it's goofy. And then on the inside, you have to deal with people that are just doing this for clout chasing and hoaxing stuff.
The people who are in cities and stuff like that, there is no evidence that we can present to them that they will believe, in my opinion, because of the advent of, you know, AI. The prevalence of that is in everything now. Everyone's skeptical anyway. So no matter what happens, even the best case scenario, that Sasquatch is proven. We have the best footage, the best everything. In today's society, how far up is that really going to go? You know, I'm sorry if I sound like I have little faith, but I do. Ultimately, I do not believe that it will find its way to, you know, the viewership of all. I believe it's already, you know, the mainstream news channels, and it's whatever they decide needs to be important is what gets shown. But I do believe there is a true resistance to Sasquatch getting out. There's a special interest for Sasquatch not being proven. Okay, so what do we do about that if that's true? If that's true, if I'm correct in my assertion that there is a movement against the truth of Sasquatch getting out to the mainstream, we do not want this public knowledge. For what reason? You know, that's the $1 million question, I think. And where I believe if we really just kind of follow the patterns, you know, they do seem to lead to a kind of a interesting direction that Sasquatch is not something that really will be mainstream for a very long time, because it's just not convenient. I really believe it's not for again, certain industries, and I think that they all kind of work together in a way to make sure that not only is Sasquatch a joke, shout out to Sasquatch Sunset, I've never watched it, never will, but there's all kinds of other they wanted a joke. They wanted to be ridiculed as much as possible in the scientific communities. But also just the state of people now, no one really believes in anything. And so you kind of have a whole lot going on in that sphere of not only is there opposition to belief from the scientific community, but just your average Joe Blow, he doesn't care, and will not only not care, but he won't even entertain it, because he'll just dismiss it as trash AI, or what do they call it? Slop AI?
Yeah, until he's driving down the road and he sees one crossing the path in front of him,
Right, which is exactly, my friend. That's where I'm getting to, is if you live in the cities and you're expecting to become a believer in Sasquatch, well, unless you have an amazing amount of faith, it's probably not going to happen like that. What you got to do is get out into the woods, get outside, get the stink blown off you, get into the woods and see for yourself. Find some prints in some dermal ridges. There's pretty much all the scientific proof you really need besides a hair sample. You already, Jeff Meldrum already laid the groundwork there, no pun intended. And so, but you have to experience, something, usually, whether that's sound or a visual, scent. You gotta experience it as much as you can, but the jury's out on the best way to stir up interaction. Now, if you want to go down that rabbit hole, I can talk about what works for me, but oh no, I was just going to wrap up by saying I think it's most important that people get outside and get boots on the ground, just try to find out for themselves, not to prove anything. Let's take the ego out of it. It's always a little bit overzealous anyway.
Right.
Let's just take the ego out of it. Stop worrying about, if it's going to be proven someday, if it's going to be me, anything like that. Let's just get out there and have fun like a kid. Some would theorize that they're attracted to that, and I count myself among them.
See, I can't agree more with that statement, because, and maybe for a different reason, because at the end of the day, the people that don't have a perspective about just what kind of great gift we have as Americans in just the amount of sheer wilderness that you can go and explore compared to any other country on this planet, is just absolutely insane. And the variety that you can find is absolutely just untouchable. But so many people don't see it. So there are plenty of people out there that have never made it outside of the inner city. And that's not us blaming them. But in order to wrap your mind around the idea that something can exist here in America that we've never seen before, you have to go out into the woods to understand just how derelict it can get, how fast it can get that way, and how hard it is to get back to where you came from sometimes. Now, I'm not saying go out and get lost in the woods. There's a whole series dedicated to that. Don't do that. But take a hike, go take a 10-mile hike out there on a loop and just see what that does. See what the sights you see really are,
See where it takes you. Because you might just be surprised just what you discover about yourself and being out there and just, nature. I think Steve Irwin was right, man. Get out there and show some love to the animals. Be in, as some of the Native American tribes say, be in relation to everything as much as you can in a good way. In a good way,
Exactly. Going out and camping and making sure that
camping.
you're taking care of the part that you're utilizing, but understanding how to survive out there, or at least try it. You know what I mean? That
Right.
can open your perspective quite a bit on what's possible out there. Some of my favorite experiences and some of the best stories that I tell all the young kids at work come from the woods. They think I'm some sort of mountain man. You know what I mean? They look at me like
Yes,
I'm
I totally
Jeremiah
agree.
Johnson, because they're like 18-year-old city kids. They don't know nothing, you know? And some of them
Yes,
are like an FFA and they're like, yeah, that ain't as crazy, but they're like, they also look like the crazy kid to the rest of them, you know?
of
Now,
course, of course.
that really that really sets where I think we want to say here though, is that Bigfoot, no matter what happens come October whenever they allegedly release this movie, we're going to make a video on it. And it's not going to be
Mm,
the death of Bigfoot, you know? Because
of
even
course.
if it is undeniably, without a shadow of a doubt, that the Bigfoot or the Patterson Gimlin film is fake because of the Capturing Bigfoot movie, that doesn't mean Bigfoot's dead. There are tens of thousands of reports out there of people that have seen things that they can't explain. There are footprint evidence out there. There's audio evidence out there. There's hair and DNA getting analyzed. There is so much going on that just knocking out one video that might have stood for 60 years, but it's still just one video. That doesn't mean anything. And the people that have had experiences, we know that. And that's why we go out there to find more evidence, to go and analyze these patterns in the reports. So that way we can have better things to tell people that don't believe or people that are skeptical on the subject. And if that's you out there listening, don't forget that, you know? If we're
Yes.
going to be out there proving this to everybody else, we can't just let a couple of bad days keep us down. You got to keep going on and you got to find the evidence anyway. And then whenever you get it, got to share it, you know?
Hmm.
And don't be
Hmm.
afraid to get back out there, you know? Everybody that spends time in their echo chamber, no matter where it's at, just they run the risk of never actually growing or never pushing the subject forward. And that's something we can't risk, especially now, whenever there's so much on the line when it comes to how Americans look at Bigfoot. We got to keep going. But is there anything you want to add before we wrap it up tonight?
Yeah, I would like to say I couldn't agree with you more. What you just said, I think we got to keep on keeping on, even when it looks hopeless, in the scientific sphere, in the culture in general, with in concern, just in concern to Sasquatch, we gotta be optimistic about it. We gotta trust ourselves too, and what we experience out there in the world. We gotta really trust ourselves, because we can, if we put too much doubt in what we experience, then I don't know. I just don't feel like that's any way to really just live. But hey, we people are free to stay in their echo chamber if that's what makes them happy. But I gotta say, I thought I was happy until I went outside and started walking around, and then I found a whole new level of happiness and joy, like I hadn't felt since I was a kid. Because I was more of a gamer. Truth be told, most of my life has been behind a screen. So getting out into the muck again, and doing it with gratitude, I think is exceptionally important. And it's been kind of the mindset that I think has you really made some level of what I think is interaction possible. I think there is there's so much joy to be found in the woods, and we really do need to do all that we can to come back to that, because at the end of the day, Sasquatch is just conjecture. But what it should do ultimately, for those interested, is get them out into the wild to see for themselves. You know, I think
Absolutely.
that's what's so important in today's world, now more than ever.
And even if that's the only reason why, it's still a good reason why to get out. But I think that's a good place for us to wrap up tonight. So if you've made it this far in the video, just give us, like, comment, subscribe. Let's have a conversation about all this down below. Let's see what you guys think. And stick around. You might find out something that you haven't found out before. If you'd like, check out the video that's recommended up here. And I've been Jaster, and this has been Jacob, and this has been the Southeast Bigfoot Research Organization. And you have a wonderful night. Bye-bye.
Later.